Okay, good morning, everyone. And I'll be today spending some time talking about the privileged attack vectors, how attackers can gain access to your endpoints, or using mechanisms such as phishing or ransomware attacks. And I'm going to talk about how you can build an effective defense strategy to protect your enterprise and your users against these kind of attacks, right? First, let me just see what's a big challenge that most enterprises face, right? At this point, especially when you're trying to attack or defend an endpoint or a user's endpoint, that's where your application of security policies and user friendliness and his ability to use the application and his endpoint effectively need to be balanced very thoroughly. And because this balance is very difficult to achieve, that is why most of the attackers tend to focus more on endpoint, and especially in COVID-19, with a lot of these endpoints now working remotely, where they have either are using a home-based network or using home Wi-Fi and may not have the necessary all the protection that an enterprise network provides. They're more susceptible. So if you look at the threats, right, and these are just increasing. You now have a lot of phishing attacks that are leveraging malicious documents or ransomware, and of course you have these attacks that are focusing on the late exploits. On the users, right, they tended to more to be on the productive. They want to get to the task as soon as possible and get back to their free time in the evening. So they tend to be not so conscious a lot of times when they're, especially when they're middle or focused on their work. They tend to click on unknown links. They download some application that they believe can help them be more productive, and they typically the data and that IP that they have with their endpoints or with their enterprise network access is something that the attackers are often not aware of. One challenge that we normally have, and more so with remote working, is enterprise tend to give more and more privileges to the end users because they do not want their help desk to be overwhelmed with a lot of calls. And this is exactly what is exploited by a lot of attackers. Now, if you go back to what Kevin Metnick, one of the a very famous hacker, has said is companies spend a lot of energies and money on network security, but in fact it is the users and users endpoint that are one of the biggest targets that more enterprise are now observing. Now, what are the most common attack techniques? And I'm going to demonstrate one or two of these as I go into my demo. And if you look at the first column, and that's the interesting one, right? You'd not expect an user to use these kind of attacks. These are very simple attacks, right? Password guessing attacks. These means that the user is using a very simple password, right? You have dictionary-based attack. These are again where a user is using something that is a very commonly known word with a common variations of that word, right? And of course, then you have brute force attacks where a user continues to use, a set of known passwords or known, a cache of passwords against an target. And then, of course, there are things like using security password and password spraying, especially when a large social media or maybe a large enterprise has been breached, and now an attacker has a cache of a large set of passwords, username, email IDs, and passwords that he can then try against enterprise attacks. The second one is, of course, the vulnerabilities, right? The misconfiguration. These are more operational related due to, maybe lack of, timely patching, or maybe because someone has misconfigured certain data or left certain system open into the internet, right? And these are something that are again used. Again, from a complexity perspective, it is much more, difficult for an attacker to use these. And then, of course, you go with, something very easy, which are default credentials. A whole lot of attacks are just because an device was just set exposed to the internet with its default credentials, right? And they can also have scenarios where you have shared credentials or reused credentials and so on. With that, I'm just going to talk about a solution that effectively provides an add-on layer to all your existing security code. And what it does is it focuses on an attacker's attack chain. So what it means is that if an attacker needs a certain set of privileges to carry out or exploit his access to an endpoint, or thereby to expand to the rest of the enterprise, that is having what we call as admin level or high privilege accounts. Now, by endpoint privilege management focuses on that specific weakness. What we do is we ensure that a user can remain productive without having any of these admin or elevated privileges that are required. With these elevated privileges no longer required, an attacker just has a normal account which is very restricted and normally no longer has the access of trying to exploit certain features of that of the endpoint that is accessed, or trying to expand his footprint, most of which would require him to have admin level or administrator rights and privileges. With that, I'll give you a quick schematic of showing how current solutions, especially that targets on known malware and the behavior of certain exploits, right? These are very much conducted in the first two pillars, and these are typically your standard anti-malware and your antivirus and solutions. But as we go into what we call as least privilege, you can see that there are a whole lot of other attacks that can be blocked in real time and stopped. Similarly, you can go into application control that ensures that users cannot, install unwanted application like, torrent software or, for file sharing software that can then expose your enterprise to a whole lot of other risks. And last but not the least, we focus on trusted application protection. Now, a lot of attackers focus on trying to get into an endpoint by exploiting what we call as trusted applications. Now, trusted applications are applications such as the Office tools that you use, your Microsoft Word, your Excel, your Acrobat Reader, for example. These are tools that are used by almost all users, and any kind of office work would, or office day would involve him opening up multiple files and trying to access various and sending, receiving mails in these format. What an attacker typically does is trying to, build a payload into these document files or PDF files, for example, and then have it exploit. Right, a trusted application protection ensures that even if you are enabling macro, which is typically required for a whole lot of tasks, even if you have, export, it still runs within the context of the same application, and any kind of misbehavior using these features are blocked in real time. So with that, I'll just quickly tell you what are the benefits. And using this least privilege approach, what you can quickly have is you can remove all admin rights, including from some power users, right? So if you require certain administrator who needs to manage just one application, you can ensure that that admin rights are removed completely. With that, one of the biggest attack vectors, right? Around 80% of the vulnerabilities are typically exploited, involve also additional admin privileges. Second, you remove this biggest risk of admin privileges, and that make sure that the attacker, even if he has gained access, is very much constrained. This also helps you, mitigate 74% of the critical server vulnerabilities, and you can then approach security very proactively, right? And it helps you create a solid foundation. So with that, let me quickly jump into my presentation, into my demo, and let me just switch my. Just a minute. I hope you can see my screen now. Okay. What I'm going to quickly show you is how I'm going to execute an attack, right? And this is something that a lot of you would be familiar with. I'm using a distro called as Kali Linux, and this is has a lot of inbuilt attacks that are built in that users can use to either test security. Again, whatever I'm showing is for testing the security of desktops or devices that you own or manage, and not to be used against things that you do not own or manage. With that, let me just quickly start off a simple attack, right? Now, let's say you're now trying to attack an user, and what you want him to do is you want him to either download some file, or you want him to click on a file that has this payload or this attack, right? And what I'm trying to do is gain remote access into this desktop. And the simple way that I'm going to do is by creating or using a payload. And in this case, I told you this is going to be a little bit of an abridged version of my standard demo. I'm just quickly going to start create a payload file called update.exe that I'm then going to share with my with the victim, right? In this case, I'm going to create this file. It is going to have a payload built in, and what this payload does is allows me to the second it is connected, it builds a session between the remote user, whoever is my target, straight on to my network. so that I can then run commands, maybe capture his passwords, and carry out various activities on that target system. So in this case, let me just create an let me just what I'm trying to do is I'm going to just quickly set up an a shell that can listen on to connections, incoming connections, that I'm just going to now set up on this instance. And I'm just going to define what my local host near IP is. In this case, it is so like I said, I have a listener listening in, and this is now listening of our incoming connections, so that anyone who clicks on this file or executes this file on the desktop gives me access to then execute commands there. So in this case, I'm again just going to quickly show you how this works. So in this case, I've already downloaded some of these files. And I'm just going to execute this. Now, a lot of times, in spite of you having antivirus on the system, it is possible that attacker can still execute these commands because it uses certain encryption or some mechanisms of masking that it's an exploit. Now, the second it is executed on an end user, in this case, the victim's machine here, and once I go back, you can see that a session has been opened on this connection. So in this case, I have a victim who is running on this specific IP, and he has now connected to back to my machine. Now, which gives me an ability now to carry out a lot of tasks. But the most common things that most attackers tend to do is just to have what is called as the ability to capture keystrokes. And in this case, what a keystroke does is from this point onwards, anything that is typed or set up to be typed on that machine is completely going to be captured and is going to be sent over to the attacker's machine. So in this case, let's go back to this server over here, and let me just assume that I'm just going to my Gmail, for example. And this can be at this point any enterprise account, right? He can be opening up maybe his one of his enterprise account, or he can be using any other system accounts here. Now, in this case, right, whatever happens immediately in this case, right, I've just if I quickly come back over here, and if I see what you'd see is that I have captured all the keystrokes, and in this case, it clearly tells me what are the the username and the password that I have used. Now I can use this then to log on to his account, maybe try to reset his passwords or capture other details as required. Right? I'm just going to leave it at this, but just use your imagination. Once I can capture all the keywords or your keystrokes on that platform, you now have an ability to carry out listen on to our traffic, capture all the things that he's doing, capture all the usernames and passwords for his various accounts, and which comes to the most possible attacks that are used by attackers is just to use your existing username and password and then try to log on. The reason this is very effective is when a user uses a standard username and log on to his credentials, your SIM and your other tools assume that it's the user itself, right? And that is why using of multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication is something that is highly recommended. Now, with that, let me just jump into how we can quickly solve this scenario, and I'm going to also demonstrate a possible scenario where let's say, I'm going to an site, and this is a site that has a built-in, built-in malware already on that site, right? And the second I go to this specific site, one of the things that you'd see is it has executed a payload, and with this payload being executed, you'd see that all the files that I have in this specific folder are already encrypted, and I get this message, right? It typically says that yes, now all your files are encrypted, and now you have just need to pay whatever this requested ransomware if you want to get the key to decrypt it again. Now with that, I'm going to show you two very common attacks, and I'm going to show you how these could be mitigated using our solution. Now, the most common solution that I'm going to again talk about is our endpoint privilege management, and let me just go and switch this on. In this case, I have this endpoint privilege manager running on my endpoint. And what I'm trying to do at this point is trying to show that how easy it makes a user's experience, especially at the same time being able to protect him in real time. Now, if you look at a lot of these applications, a standard challenge that you would normally have is that in order to carry out most of these tasks, you'd require admin privileges or admin credentials, right? So for example, you'd have this notification that comes up. Now, as you can see, in this case, with endpoint privilege management that has been set up, you have a concept of a trusted application, which means that regardless of whether you're an admin or a normal user, as long as policy grants you access to run certain application, you can run that effectively. You no longer have a prompt that requests you to have additional privileges or admin privileges. So user now can be fully productive just using his normal user ID and password without having to be a root or an admin user. Now again, let's go to the same website that we went a little earlier and try to see what happens if we execute the same malware. Now, as you can see, what would happen here is when a payload is being downloaded and trying to be executed, it gets blocked in real time. So rather than allowing it to be executed, what you'd see is this notification that says a ransomware was tried to be executed, but that was really blocked in real time. Now, in addition to this, it also allows you a lot of capabilities. The most simple of it would be the ability to block a whole lot of unwanted applications. So, for example, it's very common for users to try to install applications uh, that are not authorized or they shouldn't be. And this, as you can see, what has happened is it is blocked automatically. In fact, when a lot of times when you go into the internet and you try to download certain applications and then execute it, there are chances that these are infected or something that is specifically been put together by a malicious attacker. And again, as you can see, once I try to execute this, it will automatically try to block it, especially if it has any kind of malware. Now again, there are certain applications that are definitely need to run. So for example, a good example would be I need to install certain Java tools as a part of my day-to-day task. Now in this case, it would just tell you're able to run an executable, but do you want to really run it? And once I give an approval, it will allow that user to run it without having any admin privileges. So with that, I quickly come to want to wrap up my demo and just quickly talk about this core solution that BeyondTrust offers. Now we talked about endpoint privilege management, which allows you to ensure that an end user's experience is streamlined. He can carry out all the tasks as a normal user, and yet protects him from any kind of malicious attacks, and acts as a good overview in terms of your standard tools that you're already deployed on your endpoint. In addition to that, if you have privileged users, we help protect those privileged users, allow them to have secure sessions using our password management solution. And in today's day and age, when you have a lot of the users working from home, you run a risk of not giving them secure access to your to their desktop or to your network. We provide secure remote access solution that allows the users to be able to securely connect back into your enterprise and carry out their day-to-day tasks without requiring a VPN. Needless to say, this is today available both on-prem, on cloud, and as a hybrid solution. So with that, I thank you for your time today. And in case there are any questions, I'd be glad to take them.
All right, thank you very much, Ajay, for that presentation. Just for the information of everyone, we actually have an ongoing poll. So if you want to arrange a one-on-one meeting or you want to participate, do that. Just answer our poll. So now, Ajay, it's time for our Q&A. So
Okay.
I'll fire the first shot, Ajay. How quickly can my team deploy the endpoint privilege management solution?
Yeah. So I think that's one of the most common questions that we get from our customers. And the answer is very, very quickly, right? One of the things that you saw during my demo was the quick start policies. So I can quickly bucket my users into low flex, medium flex, and high flex and deploy the solution. So you don't need to deploy the solution and go through an entire learning cycle that you would in other traditional solutions.
now, does endpoint privilege management replace my antivirus or anti-malware solution?
Again, the most common question again, but the answer is it complements your existing endpoint solution. So a lot of times, even in spite of having all these tools, you see that the attacker can still gain access to an endpoint. Now, what we do is we restrict the privileges that an attacker requires to then expand his footprint or actually carry out any harm on the endpoint. With that being said, we complement the existing solutions very well and ensure that even if certain attacks are missed by your traditional solutions, we can help prevent the attacker from expanding his footprint on that endpoint and also into to the rest of the enterprise.
Ajay, in these times of COVID-19, where teams are still work from home,
Yep.
can endpoint privilege management be deployed remotely, or does the team have to be on premise to be able to install it?
Yeah. Again, a lot of our customers in COVID-19 do not have access to their enterprise and they're looking for an easy to deploy solution. So we check all the boxes there. We are available as a SaaS or on the cloud solution, which allows you to seamlessly spin up that entire solution and then deploy it across your enterprise. The second core benefit you get is when users are working from home, they tend to be susceptible to these phishing attacks or where they go clicking on malware links, for example. This allows prevent that kind of attacks. And second, also when they're working from home, they require privileges, maybe to change the password, change certain settings, again, which will require them to traditionally call the help desk. With endpoint privilege management, you can delegate a lot of these abilities down to the users securely, so that you not only get the best world of high security but also high efficiency as well.
So thank you for that, Ajay. As the poll displays, you guys may connect with Beyond Trust to learn about their solutions to arrange a one-on-one demo. And Ajay, you've hosted one of our Manila webinars a few weeks ago. For those who would like, for those new contacts would like to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, the best way is probably drop me an email, and I think I'll share my contacts in the chat window after this session.
All right, perfect.
All right.
Thank you so much, Ajay Kumar from Beyond Trust, everybody. Thank you
Thank
for
you
joining
very
me.
much for your time. Pleasure being with you.